Picture this. You're standing at the rim of a room washed in chandelier light where every smile looks rehearsed in a mirror. Every flute of champagne knows the precise moment to chime against another, and every handshake is worth the ink on a check. It's a gala night. Not just glamorous, regulated. Here, power doesn't need an introduction. It passes by, leaving a trace of expensive perfume and opening lines chosen like jewels. On the very edge of that gleaming tableau stands a woman with a worn notebook. Amelia. Hair pinned back, a simple black dress, eyes tracking movement like a breathing camera. She's not here to shine, she's here to see. If the gala is a stage, Amelia chooses the back row, the part the lights skip, to record what the lights leave out. Why be here, you might ask? For many, tonight is an opportunity. For Amelia, it's simply the setting for relationships being cinched tighter, for promises whispered under the music. She's a journalist, but not the kind who hunts scandal for a clicky headline. She observes, listens, and accepts that truth is often slow on purpose. For the past year, Amelia has chased a story about the philanthropic foundations of the ultra-rich in the city. Neat round numbers, speeches steeped in uplift, and behind them, contours blurred enough to resist naming. She doesn't have a conclusion yet, but her instinct hums. A bigger story is coiled somewhere between charity and governance. The music carries people into precise steps. Perfectly tailored tuxedos glide like a black river, ball gowns flare, and the scent in the air settles into an aroma of luxury, so refined, it's almost neutral. Here laughter doubles as the polite casing around reluctance. Some tables have become little planets of their own. The mayor leaning into the bank CEO, the chair of a For the Children Foundation, toasting with a diamond-level donor. This is golden hour for the PR photos that will bloom in tomorrow's papers. Amelia picks a quiet corner, bracing lightly against the mezzanine rail where she can see the dance floor in full. She scribbles a few lines, the rhythm of toasts, the glances, a couple of names caught by chance. To her, these fragments are brown-grey puzzle pieces from a giant jigsaw, no picture yet, but a picture surely. She's trained herself not to force clues into a frame, keep them intact, and time will glue them with an invisible adhesive called logic. The band changes the tune. On the floor, some couples drift apart, some form anew. Then a small ripple moves through the room. Heads turn, not because of anything loud, simply someone has arrived. On nights like this, the right entrance at the right moment is part of the choreography. But there are faces that, when they enter, the volume drops by half a step. No one gives the order, and still, the room obeys. Amelia looks up. Her pen stops. She knows that name. Who doesn't? Dominic Cavendish. The man whose company network splays across industries like a map of old alleyways. Tech, real estate, logistics, and philanthropy. In the data Amelia has picked over for months, Dominic's foundation is a bright white spot. Rapid disaster relief, long-term bets on education, clinics in hard-to-reach places, everything clean as distilled water, clean enough that if you do what Amelia does, you hesitate. Even angels carry chalk dust on their wings. Dominic doesn't have the enter and own the room energy. He's tall, contained, the tuxedo fitting like a second skin, but there's no wasteful motion to him. He nods to clusters, unhurried, unstraining. Others sync their pace, sliding into orbit around him. Amelia smiles to herself. Gravity, she thinks. Or better, habit. The habit of rotating around power. There's something on Amelia's face. If you stood near enough, you'd see it. She isn't dazzled. She's weighing the tug of professional curiosity against the bell of caution that says any approach too early might break the evening's natural structure. Good stories sometimes need you to wait, like night fishing in open water. Let the line sink. Let the surface close back on itself. On the floor, the violins swell into a slower, deeper melody. Amelia returns to her notebook, underlining two names that brushed her ear. She plans to descend, fold herself into a group of colleagues from her newspaper to trade a few courteous introductions. Not to work the room to get close enough to hear. A promise of sponsorship, a number off the minutes, sometimes drifts past as only a whisper. And whispers are the timber of stories that last. She shuts the notebook and breathes. Turning, Amelia startles just a fraction, just enough for her eyelids to flicker. He's standing there, a few steps away, as if the music had conjured him out of air. No orbit of bodyguards, no usher, just him, and a quiet that doesn't match the clamor below. Dominic tilts his head in greeting, a courtesy so understated it feels silent. "Good evening," he says, voice low enough that you lean in, just a little. Amelia tells herself to respond politely and step back. But nights like this have their own internal metronome. "You're late," she answers, smiling with her mouth and guarding with her eyes. "Or exactly on time." Half joke, half probe, Dominic glances at the dance floor and back. Exactly on time is when no one's tired yet. He says it like he's distracted, and yet not. Amelia feels a note of hesitation vibrate in her chest. Some people use words to decorate, some use them like switches. With Dominic, each word clicks on a small light. She knows this type. Intelligent, restrained, picking risks, like choosing footfalls. "Do you dance?" The question arrives quickly, a gentle nudge into the stillness between them. In that sliver, Amelia watches his hands, not offered with presumption, not withheld with awkwardness, just opening a space where a decision can be made. And the bell of her profession chimes, distance. Journalists keep distance from their subjects, especially subjects like this. She smiles. "I came up here to breathe." A reply that isn't no, but not yes, either. Dominic tips his head again, amused by the sidestep. Then, he shrugs lightly, "Let's see if a waltz steals your breath." The way he says, "Let's see," nudges Amelia into a laugh. It isn't coaxing. It's a small dare not to challenge her, but to test the wall she's built. Here is where the story truly begins, not when a billionaire invites a reporter to dance, but when a reporter decides whether to cross the safe line into the hazy zone. If you've ever stood on the seam between should and shouldn't, you know, sometimes your foot moves, not for romance, but for a question. The question, "What's over there?" Amelia places a hand on the rail, meets his eyes. "If I say yes, will you promise me one thing?" He lifts an eyebrow. "Don't tell me something you'll deny in the morning." He laughs, not the conquering laugh, but the laugh of someone who's found the right partner for the rules of the game. "I don't say things I'll have to deny." It doesn't guarantee truth, but it promises consistency. For Amelia, sometimes that's enough to start an experiment. Below, the orchestra modulates, violins sliding through the seating like a cool breeze. At nearby tables, a few faces tilt toward the mezzanine, as if a common instinct whispers that something interesting is about to happen. Crowds, no matter how courteous, hunt deviations from the script. An unknown reporter and a famous billionaire enough to feed a clutch of murmurs to the rhythm. Amelia nods, slowly, decisively. She doesn't know what she's choosing, a source, a storm, or a chapter she can't unwritten. But she knows a door has opened. She sets her hand in his. The first impression is warmth, then steadiness. Not the grip of a man posing with a muse, the grip of someone used to responsibility. Responsibility, sometimes heavier than power itself. "Let's see what the waltz reveals," Amelia whispers, as much to herself as to him. And they take the stairs, down into the light, into the slow-moving circles on the floor. If you're watching this far, hold one thought. No good story begins with perfect timing. It begins with a glance, a small question, and a decision to try. What waits for them inside the next turn? We'll find out when the dance starts revealing what the music can't quite hide. They step onto the floor, and the room makes space the way water does when a boat slips through quietly, naturally, as if the current had been expecting them. Dominic doesn't steer her like a man performing a role. He listens to the music with his shoulders and waits for Amelia to settle her own rhythm. There's a courtesy in that, an acknowledgement that two strangers don't yet know how the other turns a corner. "Is this part of your evening routine?" she asks, light, as they find the circle of the waltz. "Arrive, orbit, select a partner, and let the room do the rest? Routine is how people fall asleep while standing," he says. "I prefer patterns that are flexible." "Flexible patterns," she repeats, amused. "That sounds like a hedge fund prospectus." "It sounds like reality," he counters, a flick of a smile. "Control is a story we tell ourselves so we can decide what to wear. Tonight, you told yourself, tuxedo. Tonight, I told myself show up only if there's a good conversation lurking in the noise." He meets her eyes. "I'm still testing my hypothesis." "Careful," Amelia says. "Journalists are addictive and bad for your blood pressure." Only the good ones, he says. In that small exchange, something calibrates. The acknowledgement that both of them have navigated rooms like this and survived on their sense of subtext. She lets herself match his pace 1, 2, 3, and studies the man behind the manner. Up close, there's less shine, more texture. He blinks slower when he's thinking, and there's a half-second delay before his jokes, as if he weighs whether a line is worth the air. Let me ask it plainly, she says. What did you see when you walked in? He doesn't look away. Supply chains. She laughs despite herself. Of what roses, canapes, compliments? Access, he answers. Each table controls a lane. The mayor's chief of staff is the on-ramp. The Gala chair is the toll booth. The bank's CSR team is the signage that points you toward doing good. Ah. And the rest stops? Photographers, he says. Where does the highway lead? That depends who's driving. For some, tax offsets. For others, a story they want to believe about themselves. He studies her in the pause between turns. For a few, the road actually leads to a clinic where a child can get an inhaler without paperwork. She files that sentence the way a carpenter slots a dowel she might need later. You've mapped this out. It's my job to understand routes. He glances at the band. But you didn't ask me to dance to hear a systems lecture. I didn't ask you to dance at all, she says, and the line lands warmer than she expected. But since we're here, I'm a fan of maps, too. Journalists are urban planners with better metaphors, and billionaires are civil engineers with a PR budget. Chowns. It for predat forget no. He chuckles, unoffended. Sometimes, he says, they're just kids who kept building after everyone else went to bed. Did you? She asks. Keep building? He doesn't answer right away. The waltz nudges them past a column where the light stands still for a moment on his face. The short version is yes, he says. The long version is for another song. Convenient, she says, but her voice softens. If he's deflecting, it's not because the story is empty. It's because the story is heavy. Your turn, he says. What did you see when you walked in? Characters, she says. A board chair who rehearsed her laugh. A donor who hates being thanked. 3 policy aides trying to look like they're not measuring the mayor's mood. A violinist who wishes he were playing Shostakovich. A publicist who loves this room like a stage she designed herself. Kept. And yourself? A camerawoman who lost her camera, she says, but kept the eyes. He nods. You noticed the violinist. I noticed the restlessness in his fingers during the rests, she says. Most people are careless on the rests. That might be the most journalist sentence I've heard this year. Feel free to put it on a mug, she says. I'll split the royalties if you donate yours. To an inhaler clinic? Casting the privacy. To a public library, she says. One with a working boiler. He doesn't ask which neighborhood. She recognizes that as courtesy also, as savvy. There are questions that narrow a person too quickly. The music pours them into a wider loop, and the edge of the crowd recedes. A couple nearby recognizes Dominic and whispers the kind of whisper that thinks it's quieter than it is. Amelia can feel the ripple, the collective interest of a room trained to monetize curiosity. She wonders if he feels it like static, or if he's learned to treat it like weather. You wanted a conversation, she says. Let me test you back. People say your foundation is exceptionally efficient. That's the exact phrase. They say your overhead is lean, your vetting brutal, your audits public. People say many things, he says. They do, she agrees. But those things are measurable. I measured them. Did you find a contradiction worth dancing over? Not yet, she says. Which is suspicious. As in too good to be true, he tilts his head. As in so clean it squeaks, she says. I don't trust squeaks. Maybe it's just well-oiled, and you're hearing the wrong sound. Maybe, she allows. Or maybe your inputs are cleaner than most, which would mean your deals are different, which would mean someone's losing or someone's paying a price you don't put on a balance sheet. He doesn't stiffen. If anything, his posture relaxes a notch, like a runner dropping his shoulders mid-race. Would you rather I feathered the books with sentiment, he asks, so they felt messier? I'd rather you told me who gets turned away, she says. 87% of applicants, he says, without flinching. She blinks. That number seems rehearsed. It's audited, he says. 87 on average over 5 years. We publish it with the reasons. Some can fix and reapply. Some can't. Reasons like what? Projects designed to sound like projects, he says. Catchphrases instead of outcomes. A school roof that leaks, metaphorically. Or literally. And when you say no, the Riesli sing the sulas, his sand willa varies was sulas. His sulas towned, have case from the longed. The Riesing havement, the Riesing those round. In the sight. We say no with a list of 3 concrete things that would have changed the answer, he says. And if number 3 is do something else entirely, we say it. That's brutal, she says. It's honest, he says. She thinks about how many no's she's seen delivered as maybe with revisions. How often a no in her world is actually a stall for fear of backlash. You don't mind being disliked, she says. Disliked is different from distrusted, he answers. One you can survive. The other rots your chassis. Chassis, she repeats, laughing. The engineer in you is showing. Flexible patterns, strong chassis, he says, and they both smile. Some people think your philanthropy is strategic in a way that benefits your other businesses, she says after a moment. And some people think the sun rises because their blinds open, he replies, dry, then gentler. It's reasonable to ask whether influence bleeds. I ask it myself. I try to build walls. Dry? Walls leak, he says. So we add gutters and watch the drainage. We ban vendor overlap. We have a board with teeth that are not mine. And if the gutters clog? We publish the overflow, he says. That's a neat phrase. Does it ever hurt? Often, he says. Better a public bruise than a hidden infection. She files that too. People perform integrity in rooms like this. The performance usually doesn't include the cost. He's speaking the cost out loud, and with enough specifics that she can test it later. They pass the band again. The violinist's fingers dance through a vulnerable run and land clean. Amelia feels a flicker of joy that has nothing to do with Dominic and everything to do with craft. What would make you trust a foundation like mine? He asks, as if he's the interviewer and she the subject. Trust isn't a binary, she says. It's a line graph that jitters. But if you want to convince her, show me a project you funded that didn't photograph well, but still mattered. The boiler, he says. She looks up. Whose? You mentioned one, he says. There's a library 2 stops from here. The boiler's older than the internet. We replaced it last winter. No ribbon, just heat. How did you pick it? The children's librarian emailed us a spreadsheet with daily indoor temperatures, he says. 3 months of columns. At the bottom she wrote, books don't help if your hands are shaking. We called the city. They said it was on a list. We asked where on the list. They said after the election. We moved it to before the cold snap. That's the kind of answer I hate, Amelia says. Because it makes you like me, he guesses. Because it makes me want to like you, she corrects. Is that different? Thank you. Subscribe to the Life de Multiversin to it was side puller section, and one present, it is off provided. Sided was no the life of the other. First to the life of the feast, the browned and ways one. He would calm and off. It is, she says. One is instinct, the other is a decision. I don't like making decisions in borrowed light. Good, he says. I don't like being judged in it. They turn. The orbit shrinks. The world condenses to the square of polished floor under their feet. For a moment, they're a self-contained conversation with a soundtrack, and the watchers at the edges become silhouettes. You asked me not to say anything I'd deny in the morning, he says. Let me say something I will still mean then. He pauses, as if selecting a tool from a carefully arranged tray. I don't want you to go easy on me. If you write about any of this, don't sand off the edges to make me palatable. If there's a nail sticking up, leave it visible. People who say that usually want to be called brave later, she says. I've had enough adjectives, he replies. I want good plumbing. Plumbing? Process that works, he says. Flow where there should be flow, stop where there should be stop, fewer floods. And you think journalism is part of that plumbing? I think good journalism is the camera you stick into the pipe to see where the blockage is, he says. It's not the only tool, but when it's working, it keeps people honest about why the water's brown. She loves and hates that metaphor at the same time, loves it because it's exactly right, hates it because it came from him. He tilts his head toward the mezzanine where she'd been standing. What's your niche? He asks, casual, and she recognizes the capitalization in his tone. She considers, so many reporters carve out beats like real estate, city hall, education, labor. Her niche feels more like a frequency range than a topic. Institutional promises, she says finally. What we swear to do together, and what happens when we hand the oath to someone else because we say we don't have the time. That's not a niche, he says. That's the whole orchestra. My viewers like symphonies, she says. They have the patience for a slow movement if they believe the crescendo will earn it. Long form, he says, nodding. Not many keep that audience. They're there, she says. You just have to respect the arc. Start with a hook, then earn the trust with detail, and never, ever fake the landing. Never fake the landing, he repeats. That should be etched on a newsroom lintel. It should be etched on a lot of lintels, she says. The waltz begins its descent, the final phrases unfolding like a ribbon being laid down. Around them, the room exhales. Somewhere, a camera shutter repeats itself like a metronome. Will you walk a lap? He asks when the music lifts its hands. The dancers part like curtain cloth. Some fresh air before the next round of pattern flexibility. Canted to the longs, the dibbled and distended. It was obliged to the proper coat. She considers declining on principle, the principle of distance, of not letting this slide into a second act before she's sure the first isn't a trick. And then she remembers the boiler, the spreadsheet, the email line about shaking hands. She can verify all that. She will. But the fact that she wants to verify tells her something worth knowing. She's already inside the question, not observing it from the balcony. Half a lap, she says, and you answer one question as if you were under oath. Deal, he says, and offers his arm. Not his hand, an old-world courtesy she pretends not to like. They move along the edge of the floor, where the air is cooler. Up close, the gala is less seamless. Scuffed chair legs, a waiter with a blister, a bouquet already losing a petal. The small erosions she trusts. Perfection is stagecraft. She'll take the honest chip in the paint. Your question, he prompts. She thinks about going for the obvious tax, politics, the rumor about the logistics subsidiary, cutting corners at a port overseas. But the instinct that's kept her employed, the one that reads rests and notations, and the way people breathe before a lie pushes her diagonally. When did you last change your mind about something that mattered? She asks. He exits the main current of bodies and steers them toward a quiet stretch where the carpet muffles the music. For the first time all evening, he looks, not unsteady, but unarmored. 3 weeks ago, he says, we had an internal rule that barred funding to any project paying stipends to participants. It was meant to avoid perverse incentives and inflated budgets. Clean rule. Looks great in a policy doc. And we walked away from a literacy program for single parents because of that rule, he says. They offered stipends for childcare during class hours. That's not a perverse incentive, she says. No, he says. It was a lever. We said no on principle. I slept badly. I visited a session the following week. I watched a woman falling asleep over a workbook because she'd been up all night after a double shift and she couldn't afford a sitter. The stipend would have bought 3 hours of attention from a teenager next door. I changed my mind. We changed the rule. Just like that? She asks. Not just like that, he says. We rewrote the policy, carved out allowances, set a cap, and made the cap public so no one could slide a different incentive under it. We funded the program. I called the director and apologized. And then you told your board you'd flipped on a principle. I told them we discovered the principle wasn't smart, he says. Principles can be lazy, or they can be tools. I prefer tools. Tools can be misused, she says. So can principles, he replies. She can feel the shape of the future article uncoiling. The man, the machine, the maps, the leaks, the boilers, the rules that pretend to be pure until they meet a cold room. And herself, the camera on a cable, sliding into pipes to see where the blockage is. She doesn't like that this is starting to feel like a good story. She likes it even less that it feels like a necessary one. They stop near a pair of French doors cracked open to the terrace. City air arrives with the scent of rain on stone. A woman with a tray passes. Dominic takes a glass of water and wordlessly offers it to Amelia. She drinks, and the water tastes like a reset. You look disappointed, he says. I am, she answers. In me? In the fact that I can't file this in a clean drawer, she says. Some people are puzzles that snap together fast. You're one of those puzzles where every piece is grey sky, and you just have to sit with it until the edges make sense. That sounds like a compliment for the patient. If you dib you are leaf like a compliment, It's a complaint from the editor who wants a headline, she says. But I can wait. He nods toward the band retuning. The room will keep its script, he says. I'll be asked for a photo with the Gala chair. Someone will float a number and watch for my eyebrows. But if you want something unscripted, I'll verify the boiler, she says. I'll read your audited nose. I'll talk to 3 projects you funded and 1 you turned down. Then I'll decide if you're a genius of self-preservation or just a man with a wrench. Maybe neither, he says. Maybe just someone who doesn't like the sound of a pipe about to burst. She sets the glass on a side table, and the ice inside rings like a tiny bell. The moment wobbles, and she knows they'll drift apart now, because that's how the scene is written. He will go be the man in the tuxedo again, and she will go be the woman in the corner with the notebook, who prefers rooms where the fluorescent lights buzz and no one says, "Diamond donor," without irony. "Thank you for the dance," she says. "Thank you for not faking the landing," he says, and for a beat, she wonders if he means the dance or the conversation. He steps back, a courteous distance restoring itself like a curtain falling. Then he adds, almost as an afterthought, "If you decide to come see the boiler, the librarian's name is Levia. She keeps peppermint tea in the back room. Ask for it. She'll know who sent you." Amelia doesn't promise. She doesn't need to. The promise is in the way she's already turning the detail over like a key in her palm. She slips into the tide of bodies, and Dominic is released back to the orbit that reforms around him. The band kicks into a brighter tune, cameras find their marks, and the Gala returns to itself as if nothing had shifted. But something has, and she can feel it with that sixth sense reporters either have or learn. The hinge of a story has just been oiled. Morning light is not kind to galas. It peels the glitter off and leaves the scaffolding. Invoices, sore feet, a spreadsheet of donor follow-ups. Amelia prefers morning. She sits at her kitchen table with a mug big enough to be a bowl and spreads her notes like a card player who refuses to bluff. The page in the middle reads, "Boiler, Levia Library, 2 stops away." She underlines it twice. Around it she's circled phrases from the night. Publish the overflow. 87%. Flexible patterns. Bored with teeth. She has the names of 3 aides who blinked too fast when Dominic passed by, 2 PR reps with reflexes like goalkeepers, and a logistics rumor that refuses to resolve into anything she can print. She opens her laptop and pulls up the Foundation's audit page. Numbers wear tuxedos too, if you present them on a crisp white site with serif headings and tasteful blue accents. She scrolls, grant decisions by category, turnaround times, independent reviews, a downloadable CSV of declined applications, stripped of identifying details but rich in reasons. She copies it all to sift later and catches herself smiling, not because the transparency is charming, but because it's a dare. If you're going to test me, the site seems to say, test me properly. She texts her editor, need the day, following the heat. The typing dots dance. The reply lands, bring back Burns, and a boiler selfie. Amelia sends a single radiator emoji and shuts the laptop. The library is exactly where Dominic said, though he'd left out the part where the sidewalk trees lean in like gossip. A banner over the door advertises a zine-making workshop. A paper cutout of a dragon guards the children's section. The air is warm in the way that means the heating system is working without calling attention to itself. She heads straight for the front desk. "Hi," Amelia says. "I'm looking for a peppermint?" The woman behind the desk says, smiling as if a private joke has just knocked politely. "Levia?" Amelia asks. "In the back," the woman says, "and yes, the tea is real. He told you to ask." "He?" Amelia repeats, not giving Dominic the courtesy of a name. "We only have one he who remembers the kind of details that include tea," the woman says. "Back room, second door. Watch out for the box of gloves. I've been meaning to move it since April." In the back, the second door opens on a small office that has declared independence from minimalism. Post-its bloom on the walls like lichen. A whiteboard has 3 competing to-do lists and, in the corner, a doodled boiler with hearts around it. A kettle hums. A woman in her 50s with a braid and a sweater that might have been 6 different sweaters in past lives looks up. "You must be the journalist," she says. "I'm Levia." "Peppermint?" Amelia accepts the tea and the chair by the window. "You sent a spreadsheet," she says. "I sent a plea that wore spreadsheet clothes," Levia says, "and I prayed it would land on someone who had authority and a conscience, and not one without the other. What happened after you sent it? A week of nothing, Levia says. Then a call from a woman who asked good questions and didn't make me feel like I was trying to pass a test I hadn't studied for. Then a site visit from a man who wore boots and looked at the pipes with the same seriousness he looked at the budget line items. Then a contractor on a Monday and heat on a Thursday. My staff cried next to the returns bin. No ribbon? Amelia asks. No ribbon, Levia says. Just a man who asked if we'd be okay if the story never mentioned a donor. I asked if the story would at least mention the children reading without gloves. He said that could be our ribbon. Amelia writes that down and underlines it. Did anyone ask you for anything in return? She asks. A photo, a plaque, a vendor contract, an introduction. They asked us to change our hours, Levia says. Why? Amelia asks, startled. Because the kids who needed the heat were coming after school, she says. We closed too early. They said they'd fund the extra staff if the city dragged its feet. The city didn't drag this time, perhaps because they suddenly had neighbors. Notin, neighbors? He had to be to referee friends, and that is referee friends. He had to be lot of prosade and she bravel to noun. People watching, she says. Our grant agreement and the calendar are both public. It's amazing how fast a maintenance request gets a signature when a few thousand people can see the pending column. Who's a few thousand? Amelia asks. Our patrons, she says, a little fierce, and people who like to yell at city budgets for sport, and people who like to make sure the yelling is pointed at the right line item, and I suppose the Foundation's odd little army of nerds. Nerds? The ones who read the appendices, Levia says. They show up in our inbox with questions we wished the city had asked. They're annoying. I love them. Did anyone push back? Yes, she says. A councilman's aide asked why a private entity was dictating library hours. And? Amelia asks. I told him a private entity pointed at our door with money and a promise, and the public signed the schedule, she says. He made a face and then came in to take credit. I let him. Children were warm. Politicians can preen as long as the thermostats click. Amelia drinks her tea and lets the steam fog the rim of her glasses. She feels a shape taking form, not a halo, not a bullseye, something harder to draw, a series of levers built with small, blunt parts. She asks for the grant paperwork, the vendor list, the time logs. Levia pulls up folders with names that don't try to be clever. Amelia reads on the office couch, while Levia answers reference questions through the doorway. The kind of questions that make a neighborhood a neighborhood. Where are the tax forms? Do you have the big print edition? Can I print from my phone? When she's done, Amelia thanks her and steps out to the children's room. A boy on the carpet is tracing letters with a finger, whispering them under his breath. His mother, coat unbuttoned, looks like she has somewhere else to be but has chosen here. The radiator ticks, quiet and content, like a cat in the Sunday. Back on the sidewalk, the city has shrugged off the morning and decided on a cold noon. Amelia walks to the cafe across the street and opens the Foundation's CSV of declined grants. She sorts by reason code. The categories are painfully specific, outcome unclear, metrics not feasible, budget top-heavy, local stakeholder, absent, timeline politically constrained, duplicate service, partner capacity mismatch, stipend rule, Tenraid. She searches for stipend rule and sees a note, added 3 weeks ago. Policy revised, resubmit allowed within 30 days. Someone had changed their mind. Someone had left the breadcrumb. She texts the number listed at the bottom of the audit page. A woman answers with a hello that sounds like she's already smiling. This is Amelia, she says. I have questions about your nose. Bless you, the woman says. Most people only want to talk about the yeses. Most people haven't learned as much from no as I have, Amelia says. Do you have 10 minutes? I have 30 and a spreadsheet, the woman says. I'm Ruth. Hit me. They talk through the decline codes and the reapply rates, the attempts to convert no into later without lying. The problem with programs designed to photograph themselves. Ruth walks Amelia through 2 anonymized examples, a mentoring pilot with a budget line that leaked like a bucket, and a food distribution plan that would have collapsed as soon as the election signage came down. Amelia asks how they know they're not just selecting for projects that look good on an audit. Because the board makes us show our ugliest grant every quarter, Ruth says cheerfully. If we can't point to something that felt important and failed anyway, we worry we're playing too safe. You publish those? Amelia asks. We publish the lessons, Ruth says. We don't publish the partners' names unless they ask us to. Sometimes they do, they're proud of the pivot. The coffee shop is noisy, and Amelia finds herself grinning in the din because this is what she lives for. A system that expects friction and documents it like weather, knowing it will be back next season. When they hang up, she scans her notes and catches one word that has no numbers attached to it. Dominic. She stares at it like it might confess something if she looks long enough. She orders a sandwich, and the waiter who brings it knows her as a semi-regular. He draws a smiley face with mustard on the edge of the plate. Notch another tiny kindness in the ledger of the day. While she eats, she writes an outline in the margin of a napkin, then translates it into her notebook, then rewrites it again because the second outline feels like it's lying too neat, too flattering, too eager to resolve. She decides to do the tedious thing that usually saves her from regret. Verify what she already wants to believe. She pulls the audit docs again and cross-references 3 random grants with publicly available records. The numbers match, which proves nothing except that they're not sloppy. She calls a grants officer at a municipal department known for its talent at losing paperwork. He confirms the boiler timeline and sounds vaguely offended that anyone did anything quickly. Then she makes a decision she's been avoiding since the dance ended. She texts Dominic, "Visited the library," she writes. "Peppermint confirmed. Did the radiator purr for you?" he replies. "I have follow-up, some about rules, some about gutters," she writes. "If you're as fond of pipe cameras as you say, we can do a truth game. 3 questions, 3 answers, on the record, no spiders. You pick location, I pick time." "Spiders?" he replies. "The things people say when they mean no comment," she writes. "Agreed," he writes. "Come by the workshop at the shipyard, 5 p.m. We're fitting a new conveyor for the food bank. Hard hats provided. Don't wear good shoes." A part of her wants to say no on principle being, don't let the subject pick the mise-en-scène. Another part of her wants to say yes, because there's nothing like people around, tools to reveal what they're good at and what they fake. She types 5 p.m. into her calendar and underlines hard hat, like it's a reminder not to romanticize. At 4:50 she stands at the edge of the shipyard, and the air smells like salt and metal and all the useful things you can't make in a spreadsheet. A warehouse door yawns, and inside, a skeleton of a conveyor belts its way across the room, not yet alive but clearly about to be. Men and women in neon vests measure and mark and shout politely over the noise. Dominic walks toward her, helmet under his arm, steel-toe boots visible under a pair of jeans that look like they've met a crawl space. He looks less like a tuxedo that learned to be casual, and more like a casual that knows how to wear a tuxedo. An important difference. "Hard hat," he says, handing her one. "You're right on time to watch the machine that will keep cans from bruising themselves." "Cans bruise?" she asks. "Not like fruit," he says, "but a dent in the wrong place makes a seam fail, and then you've donated a shelf of soup that fails open in the back of a truck. Ask me how I know." "How do you know?" she asks, because she's not going to waste a softball when it's honest. "Once we donated a truckload and didn't test the ramp angle," he says. "A physics lesson and a tomato-smelling warehouse later, we now test ramp angles." She follows him past a set of pallets to a drafting table where 3 people are arguing kindly about talk. He introduces her as Amelia, who will keep us honest, and the engineers nod as if this is a crucial job description. She likes them at once. 3 questions, he says, ticking the air. "You start. First," she says. "You're bored with teeth. Names are public, but power isn't a list. Who bites you when you try to blur a wall?" "An epidemiologist named Syra who scares me in a way that I respect," he says without hesitating. She likes to ask, "Will this still make sense if the lights go out?" She doesn't mean electricity. She means headlines. "What did she kill last?" Amelia asks. "A logistically gorgeous plan to ship meal kits that would have crowded out a local grocer's margins," he says. "We pivoted to subsidizing snap matches at that grocer instead and doubled the store's foot traffic in the neighborhood. Same calories delivered, less harm to the ecosystem." "And the grocer?" she asks. "Suspicious at first," he says, then grateful. "Now a board member at the food bank. His name is on the website. You can call him." "I will," she says, because she will. "Second question?" he prompts. "Your vendor ban," she says. What happens when a vendor in your business portfolio is objectively the best at something a grantee needs? Then they still don't get the contract, he says. We'd rather build capacity in a second-best local shop than write an email that starts, "We promise there's no conflict." Second best gets better quickly with attention and demand. Also, best is a funny word. It usually means cheapest at scale. And when the second best fails, she asks, "We pay for the fix," he says. "We own the risk if we cause the constraint." She nods and files the answer under check later. A forklift beeps 100 feet away, and she watches how the team makes space for its swing, everyone adjusting by half a step without drama. There's a choreography to competence that looks like kindness from the outside. Third, she says, "Tell me about the logistics rumor, the port, the cut corners." He doesn't flinch either because he's heard it, or because he's trained himself to expect knives from any angle. "We had a subcontractor try to push containers through with a bad manifest 2 years ago," he says. "They said it would save time. It would have saved them money. A customs officer flagged it. We fired the subcontractor before breakfast. And the containers?" she asks. "They waited in the sun and we paid the storage fee," he says. "Then we cut our shipping network by 12%, added a red team audit, and put 2 people between procurement and port. One used to be a longshoreman. The other is allergic to anything that smells like a shortcut." "Names," she says. "Max and Danny," he says. "Max swears like a poet. Danny writes policy like a mathematician. They think I'm naive about what people will do to make a deadline. They're right." "And you didn't know before that day," she says. "I knew in the way people know a storm in July is possible," he says. "I didn't know where our umbrella had holes. Now I check the seams." "Who's the hovers?" She pulls out her notebook and draws 3 boxes, board, vendor, port. Under each, she writes a name. Names are places to plant calls. Names refuse to be vibes. "My turn," he says. 3 questions for you." "This wasn't part of the deal," she says, because she has to say it. "Flexible patterns," he says, and she hates that she smiles. "Fine," she says. "Ask. First," he says, "what story would make you feel like you justified the time you're putting into this? Not what's true, what would feel like a satisfying arc." She wants to lie because she doesn't want him to understand her instincts well enough to manipulate them, but she promised herself no spiders, a system that works because the rules aren't afraid to be rewritten, she says. A man who isn't pretending to be benevolent, but chooses to be useful. A journalistic record that keeps collateral damage small. "That's a lot to thread," he says. "You asked what would feel satisfying," she says. "Not what's probable." "Second," he says, "what would make you walk away from the story mid-draft? Finding out that the boiler was a one-off designed to sweeten the file," she says instantly, "that the transparency is curated to distract from a rot somewhere else, that the rules are flexible in one direction and rigid in the other, or that I'm starting to like you so much I can't see straight." Then Efrid stilled, "And define of the green, and how would you know the last one?" he asks, curious, not fishing. "I'd get defensive if someone questioned you," she says. "I'd say, but he, and produce details as if they were character references instead of facts. I've done that before. I hated the piece I wrote after." He nods slowly. "Third," he says, "would you publish something that made the food bank's conveyor slower to install by a week if it meant calling out a mistake we made?" "Yes," she says, "because a slow week is less costly than a weak system, and because if the mistake is real, it will come back meaner later. Even if the photos are scheduled for Thursday," he says. "Especially then," she says. "I don't schedule truth around photo ops." He grins into the noise and looks like someone who has found a good wrench. "Syra would like you," he says. An engineer waves them over. "We're about to test the belt," she says. "You want to see if our cans bruise?" They watch a run of empty cans, skitter and roll, and then ride the belt like sailors getting their land legs. One wobbles at the lip, thinks about rebellion, and then tucks into the groove like it remembered its purpose. "How long until this is feeding people?" Amelia asks. 3 days if we're lucky," the engineer says. 5 if the universe demands tribute. Amelia checks her watch. There's enough time to catch Max before his shift ends, to call Danny and see if she really writes policy like a mathematician, to circle back to Ruth with 3 more questions she thought of while watching aluminum ride a river. Dominic walks her to the door. "You'll write it even if it hurts me," he says, as if reminding himself as much as testing her. I'll write it so the next version of you knows where not to step, she says. That's generous, he says. That's self-preservation, she replies. For everyone. Outside, the air is knife-bright. She takes off the hard hat and carries it by the strap, feeling a little ridiculous and a little armored. Her phone buzzes a text from her editor. You alive? Barely, she types, but the pipes are singing. Don't mix metaphors, her editor texts back. Kidding. Mix them until they leak. She laughs, pockets the phone, and heads toward the train, the night at the Gala receding like a curtain while a new stage slides into place. Fluorescents, high-vis vests, stainless steel, the clean click of a rule rewritten because a woman couldn't stay awake over a workbook. The dance floor feels very far away. The story doesn't. By dusk, she has 3 new voices on tape and a bruise on her thumb from jotting notes against a moving train. Max answers, first voice like gravel rolled in honey. Manifest looked clean at a glance, he says. Then the weights didn't dance right. I smell cheats like rain. We stopped the load. People yelled. I like yelling. It makes the liars show their teeth. Who told you to stall? Amelia asks. No one tells me squat, he says. But after, Dominic signed off on the storage bill without a whimper. That's how I know where the spine is. Danny, on speaker while walking between meetings, is spare and precise. 2 guardrails, she says. Separation of interests, negative incentive detection. We model for what happens if we look good and the partner fails. If the answer is we still look good, we've designed a mask, not a program. Casting the Times de Lotte and the business too of Averia to subscribed in the returns, casting to the 20s of there. In the 7, and when the model says, mask, Amelia asks. We throw it out, Danny says, or we publish the risk and let the board hit it with sticks. Amelia calls Syra expecting ice and gets voltage instead. The question isn't whether a billionaire can be good, Syra says. The question is whether the mechanism can survive a mediocre successor. I don't care about his halo. I care about drift. What keeps drift down? Amelia asks. Teeth, Syra says. Term limits. Outside auditors who don't like us. A habit of shame, public, immediate, documented. If that embarrasses anyone, good. Embarrassment teaches. The day folds into night with the city sweating neon. Back home, Amelia spreads transcripts, cross-checks dates, and sketches a diagram she won't print. A pump, valves, gutters, pressure gauges. In the margins, boiler true, port contained, vendor risk owned. But the bottom corner stays blank, the quadrant she labels, costs. Good plumbing still charges a fee. Her phone buzzes. Unknown number. The voice is warm mayonnaise. Smooth, cloying, unsanitary. Miss Tran, it says. I hear you're wandering around inside a good man's charity. Color me concerned. People get confused when the lights are bright. Name? She asks. A neighbor, the voice says. One who'd hate for your editor to remember that grant you took 4 years ago. What was it for? Travel. From a group now on a watch list. Honest mistake. Still, headlines are lazy. The line clicks off. She sits very still, replaying a past she has already footnoted in public. She had disclosed. The paper had published the correction when the group's mask slipped. It hadn't mattered then. Someone hopes it matters now. Her doorbell rings. She freezes, then laughs at herself as the courier holds up a white box. Shipyard, he says. Inside, a hard hat, scuffed, with a note taped under the brim. 2 words, block letters. No, spiders. There have not one of the cylind. She sets the hat on the table like a chess piece and opens a new document. Top line, if you're calling, leave your name. Then she writes the laid she doesn't yet dare to keep. Not all warnings come with teeth. Some come with a grin that expects you to look away. She doesn't. She starts the next morning with a list. City permits, port audit, food bank vendor contracts, the councilman's aide who doesn't like neighbors. Bureaucracies either stall or squeal when you turn the wrench. Today, they squeal. At Public Works, the woman at the window recognizes Amelia from a school board live stream and slides a manila folder under the glass. Boiler, she whispers. Conspiratorial. Stamped, signed, and a post-it from the inspector who wants you to notice he climbed 2 flights in January. The dates match Lavia's calendar. The invoice shows the foundation paying only what the city didn't. Amelia snaps photos and files the originals back, like a librarian who believes in returning what she borrows. At the Port Authority, a clerk in a sweater vest says, "We don't comment on private manifests," then adds, "but hypothetically," and proceeds to outline exactly how a bad subcontractor might try to short a queue, where the flag trips, and how much that costs in storage if you don't cheat. Hypothetically. She hypothetically confirms the timeline. Hypothesis feels solid. By noon, the councilman's aide returns her call with the sleepiness of a man who hoped the story would take a nap. "You're writing a piece designed to embarrass the city," he says. "I'm writing a piece designed to heat it," she says. "If embarrassment is a side effect, buy a scarf. You know, some of us prefer policy to theatrics. Then pass a policy that keeps boilers out of the after the election bin," she says, "and put your name on it." He hangs up with a promise to circle back, which in fluent city means, "I'll call after someone else does the work." She texts Dominic, "Someone called about a grant I took 4 years ago." Threat in a velvet voice. "Did that come from your world? Housey 5 life, but the lest fos 5 problems. In the div, in the lest many." The dots appear, vanish, return. "No," he writes, "and if you can forward the number, I'll hand it to a lawyer with a very dry sense of humor." A second later, also to Syra. She collects patterns. "Already saved the voicemail," Amelia writes. "Already traced the exchange. It's a ghost sim." "Ghosts leave footprints," he replies. "We'll look." She knows better than to outsource her safety. She calls her editor, lays out the call, the box with the hard hat, the shipyard note. The editor listens, then says, "We'll loop security. We'll also loop legal. And we'll loop your stubbornness. Don't go anywhere alone that requires a keycard. Also, love the hat. It's remender the scythe to him, by friendjum, knotted, a scythe moan. And when the nightive re-see, can see. It's knotted. He no, be inside. He was no be a moan. And then, and the matter diviled, no moan. And the matter diviled, and the matter diviled, and the mono. Tenet. Then the leak arrives not to her email, which she expects is rummaged regularly, but to a dead-drop inbox she hasn't used in a year. Subject line, gutters. Inside, a packet of PDFs redacted but clumsy, showing a rival foundation's advisory donation to a council slush fund, a memo coaching a grantee to stage visibility before a vote, and a port memo with a name blacked out so generously that the black bleed gives away the original character length. Amateurs, she thinks, and feels a pulse of anger that isn't professional so much as civic. She does what she always does with leaks. Isolates the machine, prints only to a dumb printer, and spends the next hour treating every page as if it were booby-trapped, because reputations are. None of it implicates Dominic. All of it paints a weather map of influence that favors spectacle over plumbing. She underlines one phrase 3 times, alignment event. The memo treats hunger like a staged backdrop. She texts Syra, unsure if she's crossing a line. Leak unrelated to your shop, but it touches your orbit. Syra calls instead of writing. Send it to Ruth for our conflicts file, she says. And remember, a bad neighbor doesn't make us good. It makes us careful. Have evidence of the fans to plast. Have his fall of the minds of the Utu. And while the lined. Amelia spends the afternoon on the conveyor floor again, this time with her camera, shooting B-roll she doesn't know if she'll use. She catalogues the useful shots: the bolt tightened, the belt guided, a hand steadying a wobble, and throws away the pretty ones that would turn critique into a commercial. Dominic keeps out of frame unless she asks. When she does, he does the one thing she respects most. He follows instructions. You look like you're bracing, he says, low enough that only talk and the two of them hear. Someone is trying to dirty up the lane before I merge, she says. I'll pave anyway. Good, he says. Want to trade? I'll give you a name I'm worried about if you give me a rumor you keep tripping over. Deal, she says, before remembering she should have said maybe. He nods toward the office. They step inside, where the whiteboard is an algebra of arrows. The name is Harrow, he says. He runs a civic pack with a taste for staged suffering. He hates that we publish no's, because his model requires all yeses and a perfect backdrop. Harrow, she repeats. and the leak's redactions rearrange themselves into an unredacted silhouette. The height of the black lines fits. The cadence of the memos fits. The sudden interest in her fits like a glove with brass knuckles. "And the rumor?" he asks. "Your logistics subsidiary is still using a shell at a private yard to fast-track seasonal perishables," she says. "No proof. Just the stink of, 'Don't ask which gate we used.'" He doesn't blink. "Then that's where I'll look tonight. If it's true, I'll tell you before dawn." She studies him. This is either bravado or a promise. If it's bravado, it will break. If it's a promise, it will cost him. "Tell me either way," she says. "Don't make me find out from someone who wants my headline more than my facts." They part without ceremony. On the train home, a kid with a skateboard falls asleep on her shoulder, and she lets him. When she steps off, her phone pings. An email from an address with no name. "Careful where you dance." Attached, a blurry photo of the mezzanine from Gala night, her hand in Dominic's. The caption tries to be menacing but reads like a pout. "Objectivity." She forwards it to legal, to security, to her editor with the subject, "Cute." Then she answers it. "Objectivity is a method, not a mood. Thanks for the illustration." She doubts the sender will understand, but writing it steadies her. At home, she clicks record and reads a draft voiceover she knows she'll rewrite 10 times. The thing about plumbing is you only notice it when it fails. Some people prefer fountains. Some prefer pipes. Tonight, I met the wrench. She hits delete and tries again. We call it charity when it should be utility. We call it oversight when it should be maintenance. Delete. She keeps the line she hates to like. Never fake the landing. Her phone vibrates at 1:13 a.m. A text from an unknown number. Not the velvet voice. A photo. A gate at a private yard. Floodlights carving shadows across a corrugated fence. Below it 2 lines. Shell dissolved last quarter. Yard closed last month. Someone forgot to update the rumor. A second photo. Paperwork. Time-stamped. Signed by Danny. Third photo. Max's handwriting on a whiteboard, 2 words in caps. Underlined twice. Gutter clean. She replies with nothing but a period. He answers with nothing but the word sleep. She should, but she doesn't. She opens a new document and starts laying pipe. By noon the next day, the conveyor is humming. By 2, her inbox is boiling. 3 clean confirmations land in sequence. Port Authority, hypothetical, notes that match Max's whiteboard. Danny's policy addendum, timestamped the night the rumor died. Public Works posting the boiler fix order to its open ledger after a commenter, anonymous but literate, asked why a library was colder than City Hall. The system, for once, behaves like a system. That's when Harrow goes loud. First a thread. 100 bot-looking accounts retweet a clip of Amelia on the mezzanine, cropped like a confession. Captions hum the same tune, bias, cozy, dancing with power. Then a post from Harrow's pack, a blonded, bokeh video, accusing shadowy donors of rewriting schedules to privatize public hours. They show the open library at dusk like it's a crime scene and blur out children's faces in a way that makes them feel like props anyway. Amelia's editor pings, "We can pre-bunk this." On cam? 20 seconds. Facts only. She records in a stairwell to dodge the echo. The library hours changed because neighbors asked and the city agreed. Funding is public. The grant agreement is online. No donor gets a key. She keeps her voice level and leaves out the line she wants to add about staged suffering and rented outrage. Syra calls, "Voltage steady. You good?" "I hate that he used kids as a shield," Amelia says. "I hate that it works," Syra replies. "Send me the thread IDs. We'll post the ledger link, and the librarian will too. We'll eat gristle for a day and be stronger tomorrow." "Gristle builds jawlines," Amelia says, and Syra snorts. They hang up before either of them says the other thing they both know. This is the tax you pay for plumbing in a fountain economy. Amelia heads to the food bank, where the conveyor is making its first honest noise. The warehouse smells like cardboard and purpose. A volunteer laughs as a stack of cans rides the belt without drama. Dominic stands off to the side with a clipboard he isn't pretending to fill. He looks like he slept. He probably didn't. "You ready to lock your piece?" he asks. "Ready to lock the piece where the first unlock is a disclosures section," she says, including the gala dance, the hard hat, and the 1:13 a.m. text. "Do your worst," he says. Or your best. The words are cousins. I'll also include the call, she adds. The one about my old grunt. Include the number pattern, he says. Syra's team thinks it matches a stable of throwaways tied to 3 PAC vendors. Not proof, direction. She nods. And a note that your shop looked into the shell yard rumor and found closure papers. I verified Danny's stamps. Good, he says. We'd rather be caught double-checking than coasting. They walk a lap along the belt. Cans ride past like punctuation marks. On Amelia's phone, the pre-bunk clip starts to eat the thread signal, slowly beating noise. Levia posts a photo of mittenless hands turning pages. The caption, "Warm is public." It's better than anything Amelia could have written because it isn't rhetoric. It's a thermostat. She asks Dominic the question she's been saving for last. If this piece hurts your other businesses, she says, would you change the foundation to shield them? No, he says, too fast to be performance. Then he slows, makes it count. If we're doing this to coat a brand, we should stop. If we're doing it because heat is good, we should accept that heat makes shadows look worse for a while. That's almost quotable, she says. I'm trying to become less quotable, he answers. I'm developing a niche for silence. Good luck with that, she says. The internet hates a vacuum. Then fill it with boilers, he says, and points to the belt, as if it were a sentence completing itself. She spends the afternoon writing like a mason. One brick, test the level. Another brick, check the line. No easy villains, no halos. She titles a section, Gutters, and another, Teeth. She writes the rule that changed because a woman couldn't afford a sitter, and she names the price of that change. Conflict with a donor who liked rules that never bend. She includes Harrow's thread and the pre-bunk, the PAC's video and the ledger link, the port, hypothetical, the vendor ban, the conveyor's first run. She writes what she cannot confirm with a sentence that starts, I cannot confirm this, and draws a bright box around it so a producer doesn't cut it for time. At dusk, her editor slides into the dock to blue pencil a paragraph and then unblue it. Leave your voice in, the comment says. You earned it. A second note. Landing is clean. Don't add hero music. She doesn't. But she does add a quiet beat, a shot of the violinist's hands on the rests, still restless, still honest. It's her reminder to herself that the spaces between notes are where you hear the truth. At 4 p.m., they push publish. The thumbnail is boring, deliberately so. A ledger screenshot and a radiator. No faces. Comments start the way comments do, loud, messy, certain of themselves. Then the librarians show up, and the longshoreman, and a grocer who says his Friday receipts now pay for Saturday fruit. A nurse posts a photo of a child with an inhaler and a caption that reads, Paperwork free felt like breath. Harrow posts again, angrier, slicker, and gets ratioed by a grandmother with a library card older than a senator. Dominic texts nothing. Syra sends a single checkmark. Ruth emails a list of small errors in the city's site metadata and a promise to file tickets. The world, briefly, resembles a place where maintenance wins. Amelia closes her laptop and lets the quiet rise. Tomorrow someone will poke holes. Good. Tomorrow she'll answer a school with a roof and a council with a budget. Good. Tonight she lets herself think the simple thought she usually edits out. Sometimes, when you turn the wrench, the valve actually opens. Sometimes, the pipe sings. Her phone buzzes once. A calendar invite. Gala Round 2 Public Awards Thursday. Attached, a note from the organizers asking her to cover the philanthropic community's resilience. She laughs, declines, and writes her own calendar note instead. Library storytime, ask Levia about the dragon. Then she puts on the hard hat and, for no reason except the private joke, says into the empty room, no spiders. Aided in Cecilia, that crest. We're Levenici 4 paste. We're Levenici 4. Ididid 5. Everis, in the Sia. Idid in Savlici questions. Idid in from 7 Nici, and 11 Nici, in the Polit. See in a sieve then, 2000 Sia, and last with a peef, and 11 Nici, and the fans. A week later, the city dresses itself again, less chandelier, more stage lights. The public awards evening feels like a gala that traded velvet for vinyl, Big screens, branded step and repeat, speeches trimmed for applause. Amelia promised herself she wouldn't go. She goes anyway because endings like to pretend they're beginnings, and she doesn't trust curtains. Harrow is on the program. He arrives with a smile preloaded for the cameras and a new slogan about keeping philanthropy accountable, as if he invented plumbing. In the lobby, the librarians have a table with a cardboard dragon and a stack of winter reading lists. Levia sees Amelia and lifts a thermos. Peppermint. The gesture stitches the room into something human. Inside, the show runs on time. A councilman thanks our partners in generosity, pausing just long enough for clips to be cut later. A montage rolls. Polished hands passing symbolic checks, children's faces blurred the wrong way. Then a surprise, an unglamorous segment slips between packages, a 2-minute explainer on boiler permits and open ledgers, narrated by a voice that sounds like it has better things to do than gild a truth. Amelia blinks. Someone in programming decided to honor maintenance. Dominic keeps to the edges. No tux pose. When his foundation is called, he sends Ruth and Syra. Ruth thanks the city clerks by name. Syra says, "Principles are tools. We sharpen them when they fail." The applause is real because it's confused people clap while their brains catch up. Harrow's turn comes last. He strides up in lights he understands and begins a speech about optics. 4 sentences in, the big screen behind him misbehaves, not hacked, just corrected. The open ledger link appears as a QR with the caption, "Hours are public." A second card, "Grant agreements, click." The producer must have swapped the asset deck after the pre-bunk. The room murmurs, then quiets into the sound honest links make. 1,000 phones opening pages that don't flatter anyone, just inform them. Harrow blinks. He pivots into a line about dialogue, but the air has moved. A grandmother in row G holds her phone up like a lantern. The dragon from the lobby peeks through the doorway, carried high by a teenager in a staff tee. After, the lobby fills with the post-show shuffle, handshakes, coats, the rustle of verdicts forming. Amelia feels the tug of the exit and of a second look. She chooses the second look and finds Dominic half-shadowed near a service stair, watching the librarians pack the dragon into a box that has obviously seen this ritual before. "You didn't take the stage," she says. "They didn't ask me to," he says. "They asked us. That's better. And well, I've manned and the bizzard with cans of tans resintions." She tilts her head toward the screen, still bright with the ledger QR. "That was you?" "That was programming," he says. "We sent them a packet after your piece. We said, if you want to talk about resilience, talk about permits." They said, "Fine, but make it under 2 minutes." Ruth made it 98 seconds. Amelia laughs. "Your niche for silence is failing." "Maybe my niche is ladders," he says, nodding at the service stair. "Quiet ones, bolted to walls." They stand for a moment in companionable unimportance, while a janitor wheels past with a bin that squeaks honestly. She thinks about endings, about how the best ones refuse to close a door you may need again. She thinks about the boy tracing letters, about Max's "I like yelling," about Danny's math, about Syra's teeth, about Levia's peppermint, and the dragon, whose job is to make reading feel like play and heat feel like air. "I'm filing the piece that says, 'for now instead of forever,'" she says. "That's the only honest tense I trust." "Good," he says. "I prefer verbs to epilogues." A string quartet in the corner, hired for ambiance, starts something unshowy and perfect. It isn't a waltz. It's steadier 4/4 time, built for walking out together without pretending the night rewrote the morning. Dominic offers nothing dramatic, no hand, no bow, just a half step that matches hers toward the door. She doesn't need more. At the threshold, a volunteer from the food bank jogs up, out of breath, cheeks bright. "We moved 1,000 extra meals this week," she says, as if confessing to a crime. "The belt didn't bruise a single can." "Good," Amelia says, and the word feels larger than it is. Outside, the city exhales into cold. Neon skims the wet pavement. Sirens fade. Somewhere, a boiler knocks twice and settles. Amelia pulls her coat tight, feels the hard hat weight of the past days drop from her shoulders, leaving the shape of its lessons behind. She knows the thread will fray. She knows someone will stage a nicer story tomorrow and sell it as truth. She knows the pipes will clog again, because pipes live to test you. But she also knows the path back. Ledger, permit, Rule rewritten with a name attached. A phone that rings in a back office where a doodled boiler wears hearts like armor. She knows who to call when the rain smells wrong. At the curb, Dominic says, "You taught us a cleaner way to publish a no. You taught me a cleaner way to measure a yes," she answers. He smiles, small, earned. "See you when the next gasket fails. Count on it," she says. "And don't fake the landing." "Never," he says. They turn in different directions, and the camera, if there were one, would not follow either, but rise instead over a city of valves and gutters, of dragons and ledgers, of hands that turn wrenches, and hands that turn pages, rooms where power learns to share its light, and rooms where light is simply heat. The music is 4-4 and the night is honest, and the story ends where good plumbing always does, not with applause, but with flow.